coming 15 minutes or so, I'm going to stir us all into noticing our bodies, attuning to our sense and lived experience of this talk all through our body. The talk will definitely shed some light on research on how parents, caregivers interact with their children and how this interaction has an influence on their neurological development. Dance movement therapy is a technique that helps us recognize our non-verbal feelings when we experience our internal. So as a dance movement psychotherapist, we start with our internal. And as we move from our internal, we can reach out to the external, the outside. Because it is our internal that actually wants to always connect and communicate. So when we do our movement, we gain insight into what is on the outside. And by making sense of the outside, we thereby make sense into our internal. We move. When we move, we integrate our here and now, eventually to where we want to be. By movement, we understand our stability, our grounding. This is where, through this movement and our understand, our insight, this is where the mind meets the body. I know I can't see a lot of you right now, but as you're all there, and because we are here into a movement experience, I would like to encourage us into a short movement sequence. So if we can just try this, keep your feet firmly on the ground. And if we can try this, thank you. And we can just focus on your core right now. I know you can't even see me. I have my hand is over my core right now, but just think about your core. Take a deep breath from here. We'll expand our lungs, we'll expand our beings right now, our arms. And as you breathe in, just expand yourself as much as you can. So expand your spine, everything. So with that breath, extend yourself out. And when you think you have filled yourself up, contract back into the center. So curl back down into our core. And let's try that just with your breath and as much as. So you don't have to copy me, but as much as you think your body would like to move up and down. So fill your lungs up with air, take yourself up, try it yourself. So I'm going to give a little moments, and as many of you would like to try it in yourself, just try it, just extend yourself out. And while you breathe out, just curl back in. So this movement that we did today, right now in the beginning, we are actually emulating the first movement rhythm of the child. The child begins communication from the womb of the mother. And this is from where the mother actually understands the baby exists. So the baby is actually in the womb of the mother and going, like, they're breathing, and that symbiosis that the baby is making with the mother, that existence is where that's the first place where the non-verbal communication begins between the caregiver and the baby. And when the baby is out, we leave so much out into the verbal. We leave everything out to be spoken about and to be talked about, leaving this powerful world of the non-verbal and our movements. We leave it out. We don't interact with that. We don't communicate through that. My curiosity into parenting began as my practice as a child and adolescent psychologist and a dance movement psychotherapist. In my practice, I would have adolescents, young adults, struggling with depression, self-harm, ruminating thoughts, come to me with questions towards meaning, purpose, point of their living. Why am I in this world? Why did my parents have me? Statements like, I will never forgive my mother. I don't want to let go of this hate towards my dad. All these children in a constant struggle, trying to live up to the potential that their parents thought was for them. Somewhere they internalized this dialogue that they heard. In family meetings, I would often find there was a connection, a bond that was missing. Children's dialogues made me wonder, have they internalized this disappointment? Conversations between the parents and the children went to a tangent where children were being talked at rather than being talked to. Growing up in India, I always felt that parents always knew everything about us. I mean, they knew better, definitely. And children were like trophies for the parents. They were to be made something fit for themselves. Like we had to be shown off. Parents tend to provide less space for our emotional expressions. If we were not good at anything, it only meant we were not trying hard enough. So, I mean, this does leave all of us with a sense of disappointment to our entire families. Einstein wrote, and I quote, "Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its entire life believing that it's stupid." Carol Dweck calls this the fixed mindset. I also don't want to blame parents here. They're also in a lot of pressure. To be honest, I faced this myself as a parent while bringing up my child. My child actually becomes a proof of my good parenting. So unless my child does something well, I don't think I've become a good parent. But I remind myself with Shefali Sabari's statement that you are raising a spirit throbbing in its own signature. So my child actually has something to do in the world that I as a parent can actually support and help her grow. Russo's study says that 8% of people who have post-traumatic stress disorder actually gets linked back to babyhood. That is why it is extremely difficult with adults fraught with PTSD to overcome the trauma despite many years of therapy, medication, treatment. Gerhardt emphasizes that early experiences in childhood have a great impact on the physiological development of the child. She explains that when an infant is in constant state of stress, high levels of cortisol get released and they are constantly present, and which as a result of which they shrink the anterior cingulate and the medial frontal cortex, and as a result of which the amygdala is unable to process its proper reactions. The amygdala, for all of us, we would like to know, is the integrative center for our emotions, our behavior, and our motivation. So what would happen if our amygdala is in stress? We often experience emotional dysregulation. So, and if we also constantly sometimes wonder that what is really happening with us, that's why we are in constant stress. So the amygdala has gone into a response of constantly releasing cortisol, which helps us, which makes us always feel that there's something happening. We're unable to have flight or fight, but we're always in freeze. So all this extra glucose that gets released in our systems is always constantly there. Wondering where is the mobility, but we're unable to do this. I want us to understand what is the real kind of stress that young children can actually go through, because parents will wonder, my child, usko kya stress hai? My child has no stress. But the kind of stress that matters the most to young children is the lack of support from their parents. So that is the kind of stress we're talking about. That's what children really need. A recent study used magnetic imaging to look at the brains of young children at the lower end of the social scale. The study found that it was not poverty, nor the parents' poor prospects, nor their low levels of education, which affected the growth of the hippocampus, but instead the parents' hostility, which made the hippocampus shrink. So if you look at it, what we are really wanting to provide to our children is not the money, is not the toys, not the extravagance, not the cars, not the gadgets, not the screens. What the children are actually really looking for is the support. The growth of the brain is happening at an exponential rate, which is deeply rooted in the childhood having the right kind of environment and their growing experiences. I started to look for answers to understand what can bring to the surface of attachment and what can help us really make these early years now count, to make and to understand that there is an unparalleled growth that is going to happen. So if you look at this, the newborn weight of the newborn brain weighs about 333 grams, and it trebles over the first 2 years. So we have so much to do in these years. So and to my answer that I was looking for, my answer was, of course, in my practice all along as a dance movement psychotherapist. In dance movement psychotherapy, we learned that movement is the basic form of communication. It is, in fact, the first form of communication. So if you remember the first movement, experience that we did. I want to again get us back into feeling as to what we are feeling in our bodies right now while you hear all of this that I'm talking to you about. Yeah, we are actually forgetting that when we leave so much to words, we are leaving the 90%, which is our entire existence. The 90% of us is our body, and that we are leaving to just our words to maybe tell a little bit of what we can do. Our body stores all our memories, our stories, our emotions. In today's day and age, when the children have such a sedentary lifestyle, everything is on screens, everything is virtual, everything being provided to them before even they ask, we are in need for dance and movement even more. There are so many aspects of dance movement psychotherapy that we have learned. What helped me most in my practice throughout these years, and what I will have to offer today as well, as I will want to talk about attunement and how attuning with our children is so important to develop a rapport and connection with them. It is the same approach that I use to connect as a parent myself with my child, and when she's having those things and I can't understand what she's really wanting, I attune with her, and I attune with her through my body, through her body, because that helps me understand what she's really going through. So as a bodily sense, I experience what is happening. And when I move alongside her, I understand that maybe this is what is happening within her also, because I attune to my body. So, which is why it's very important for us as parents to also attune and be so connected to our bodies. Attunement while parenting has an interaction so critical to human development, which is why I would like to speak about the importance and the impact that attuned parenting can have on our child's brain. Attunement is the interactive reciprocal state. It lays the foundation for empathy in our children. It's a deep, genuine connection with another human being. It brings into harmony. So when we don't know what another person is feeling, and like I'm going to reiterate it again, when we are not able to understand what someone is feeling, we really tune into. And our child is when we when they're not when we're not able to understand their feelings, what they're hearing, we really need to attune to them. And by attuning, I mean really tuning into, like how we tune into their FM frequency. We need to move to what we want to hear, so we tune into that. Similarly, to our children, we tune into what we want to hear. We understand what they are trying to tell us. By doing that, we feel and imagine their emotional experience. When we attune through our bodies, it helps us understand what is happening in any given situation. It helps us end the conflict. It helps us act differently. Attunement gives rise to empathy naturally because we're right there. We're understanding their perspective, and we don't have to empathy if we do understand their perspective. Attuning is being attentive, encouraging their activities, receiving their activities, guiding them, and deepening that connection, deepening that discussion, deepening that communication. It is about respecting our children, showing them trust, hope, and compassion through all of that when we are alongside them. And all of this we can do through movement. David E. Arendendo explains the concept of attunement and why it is so critical to healthy development, and also how to develop later capacity of empathy. As we look at this picture right now, if we look at the caregiver and the child, really attuning, really like the caregiver is really responding to the child the way child is responding to them. Yeah. So the entire thing goes from the eye. So that you look at this, the expression of the response goes from the eye to the limbic system to the frontal cortex. The whole brain gets involved in these interactions. And by attuning and attaching, our children get the experience of what other humans are like and what the world is like. So their entire brain gets that connection. Attunement is what we see in the mother and the child when they are dancing and they're connected. Their brains, their hearts, they learn so much in such a short time that that they completely understand what is happening within them. So if you look at this connection between the child and the mother, they are dancing, their movements are connected, their brains, their hearts. Look at the responsiveness that the mother is giving to the child. And this back and forth makes the child understand that the world is a safe space and the world is responsive to them. The child is developing foundations of trust here. So if we really want to understand what attention our children want, we understand that this is the kind of attention and the attunement that we're looking for. Following my passion in dance movement psychotherapy and early childhood development, I started my first foray in understanding and explaining and talking about, knowing about, right now also spreading about attuned parenting. This passion was born out of my desire to teach parents to gain valuable insights into understanding multitude of ways in which they could interact with their children. My vision was to be able to create a space and a forum for parents to celebrate parenthood, rather than parents being scared about what is in the future and what the future holds for my child. I came up with the acronym within the Dancing Bond, which I would like to share with you, and it's called REFLECT, which is responding to our child, having empathy for my child, creating fun, love, embracing our children, communicating with them, and being there. Respond that psychologists talk about that recommend that we should ignore our children, and when the child is having one of its tantrums, not speak to them. We call it zero strokes. However, researchers have found that even the most difficult and irritable babies do just fine with just responsive parents. The outcome of each child depends differently, but it depends more on the mother and the father than on the baby. There is no difficult baby, it is only our reactions to our children. Empathy is just being alongside with them, understanding their difficult emotions, as well as doing different celebrations with them. Fun. Isn't that all that we need all the time? Don't we always want to have fun with our children? If we could always create those difficult moments into funs and games, isn't that a great spin to life that we would like to show our children? Love. Unconditional positive regard is what Carl Rogers calls it. Accepting children for who they are and having that unconditional love for them. Just for who they are, not for what we want to make them. Embracing. No amount of hugs and cuddles can spoil our children. So please go ahead. Let's hug our children. It helps the flow of oxytocin. Studies have shown that 20-second hugs show greater reductions in blood pressure and heart rate. Communication. Let's always keep that communication open with our children. Let's find different ways. Let's find creative ways with these puppets, crawling with them, doing different things. And let's keep that always going. Let's keep our gadgets away. Let's keep everything away when we communicate with our children. And to be there with our children. Sometimes just being with our children, witnessing them, just being with them in moments when they are creating, being themselves. If we are active participants in their life, of just in their being, that's more than enough. When we are reflecting, we build a nurturing interaction between the caregiver and the child, which goes a long way in promoting healthy emotional development. Because that relationship in itself is what stimulates the natural maturation of the brain and the nervous system. The Dancing Bond, as a branch of dance movement psychotherapy, aims to prove that well cared for babies will become adults with resilience who are able to swing with the punches dished out by life. It is our connection and our reaction to them, which is where our focus needs to be. When we react to our children, affects them how we react to them, and this cyclic dance between the caregiver and the child is where our children's future is. Scientists suggest that our rationality and language abilities grew out of our ability to actually be emotional. So when we tell that we should not be sad right now, we should not be upset right now, please don't be angry, this is not the space to do so. What do we do with those emotions? They get stuck in our bodies somewhere. And what do we do with that? Almost nothing. Let's give space for all of that. So in my quest of opening out attuned parenting to new parents and to all of us as well, I would like to leave us with a question. What if we could change the story? What if we could change the beginning? Could we change the whole story?